In a world ravaged by an unparalleled catastrophe, several religious groups have renounced the use of speech as a purification ritual. In this new paradigm of silence, a young woman named Azrael dedicates herself to gathering fruit in the thick of the forest, alert, always watching every movement around her. Beside her, Keenan, her companion, tries to warm himself by a bonfire that Azrael quickly extinguishes with a rag, afraid that the smoke will reveal their location. Unable to speak, Azrael's discontent manifests itself when she pushes Keenan, who looks at her with regret. Despite their disagreement, reconciliation is swift, and she gives him a bracelet made of small branches. A sharp, continuous whistle breaks the calm, forcing them to flee hastily. Keenan proposes that they separate to find more escape routes. With some reluctance, Azrael agrees. Alone and frightened, she feels danger lurking in every shadow. Her escape ends abruptly when two enigmatic figures capture her after a short struggle. To her horror, she discovers that Keenan has also been captured. He tries to resist, but the threat of a sharp machete stops him. The kidnappers lead them to a vehicle and chain Azrael. The captors disperse in two cars and head to a clearing in the forest where they have erected a makeshift altar. Upon arrival, the atmosphere becomes solemn. Azrael is tied to a chair, and a woman identified as Josephine approaches with a knife, with which she makes a cut on her calf. After this, the group moves to a nearby hill, where they begin an enigmatic ritual, aligning their breathing and executing a series of ritual movements. The whisper of the wind intertwines with the mysterious ritual, and as if part of a drama, the clouds darken the sky directly above Azrael. Above her, a mobile made of cans and bottles hangs from a rope, jingling ominously with each gust of wind. Suddenly, a flicker in the corner of her eye catches her attention, though she is unable to identify the source. As the figure approaches, the breathing of those present grows deeper, synchronizing with each step towards the altar. Azrael, perceiving that she is being prepared for a sacrifice, intensifies her efforts to escape. The approaching figure is revealed in the light as a humanoid entity with skin that seems burned and charred. In a sudden tumult, Azrael manages to free an arm. One of the kidnappers tries to subdue her again, unaware that a loose board from the chair has caught on his sleeve. When he leans over to secure her again, Azrael takes the opportunity to push the man, who loses his balance and falls crashing to the ground of the clearing. The creature lunges voraciously at the fallen man, consuming him with brutality. Azrael, determined not to witness such a horrifying spectacle, breaks free from her bonds and flees the scene of terror. The cult members, absorbed in the grotesque scene, are slow to notice her escape. When they finally realize Azrael has already gained considerable distance, she reaches a stream, the murmur of which mixes with her ragged breathing. Despite the relief she feels at having escaped, the pain of losing Keenan and the constant threat overshadow her sense of liberation. She crosses the water and quickly gathers leaves to make a makeshift bandage for her wounded leg. Focused on her task, she doesn't notice the arrival of another figure, this one with erratic movements and a distorted form. Azrael only looks up when the presence of the new creature is already imminent, and it is too late to escape. When Azrael hears that peculiar noise, similar to a horse's cough, she knows she must act with extreme caution. The creature emitting that sound, clumsy and seemingly oblivious to her presence, pushes her to seek a hiding place, slipping to one side. The beast, heavy and slow, drags its body while sniffing the air, trying to detect her. Azrael stops and presses her wound to minimize both the bleeding and the scent that could give her away. When the creature becomes confused and loses her trail, Azrael takes the opportunity to move away and continues on her way until she discovers tire tracks on the ground, deciding to follow them to a chaotic and desolate camp, guarded by a single person. With great caution, Azrael approaches the barrier of rubble, beginning to move it to open a path. Once inside, she crawls stealthily across the camp floor. As she moves between the tents, she accidentally stumbles upon an object, creating a noise that catches the guard's attention. Fortunately, the guard dismisses it as insignificant. Azrael hides behind a vehicle, where she finds a twig bracelet near some chains, signs that Keenan had been there. At that moment, Josephine arrives at the place accompanied by an acolyte. Azrael hides again, waiting for the opportune moment to act. She watches as Josephine attends to her sick mother. Later, Josephine heads towards a wooden structure that appears to function as a church. Upon opening the door, an interior is revealed, occupied by faithful who move in a disorderly fashion between the benches, under a decoration of simple drawings engraved in the wood. Leaning against a crack in the wall, Miriam, clearly pregnant, immerses herself in deep prayer. As she turns, her advanced pregnancy is evident, capturing the attention of Josephine, who looks at her with a mixture of concern and fear. This feeling intensifies when observing the drawings of children embodied on the walls. Tension grows in the enclosure as some devotees shed tears. A cold wind filtering through the crack whispers a chilling lament. Only when the wind calms down, Miriam extinguishes the candles and notices Josephine's presence. With her face marked by anguish and her hands on her belly, she awaits some news. Josephine, with a gesture of disapproval, points out that the sacrifice has been unsuccessful. The faithful begin to withdraw, leaving Miriam alone, immersed in silence and desolation at the heartbreaking news. In the silence of the empty church, Josephine approaches Miriam with a saddened countenance. Miriam, however, responds with a decisive blow and a look full of reproach. Shortly after, hearing a noise outside, Miriam approaches the window, finding only the immensity of the void. At the altar, a drawing catches her attention, a female figure with golden hair being consumed by infernal flames. Josephine walks away, lamenting the escape of what would be her sacrifice, unaware that Azrael is hiding in a secret compartment under the floor she walks on. From her hiding place, Azrael cautiously observes every movement of Josephine, who, reluctant to leave, begins to inspect the place with slow steps, as if looking for an intruder. Azrael, hidden behind a column, loses sight of Josephine. Startled by the creaking of the wood, she tenses just as Josephine's face emerges from the shadows, alarmingly close. Azrael moves deftly and catches the legs of the young woman trying to flee. Josephine responds with a firm grip on Azrael's neck, trying to choke her. However, with a nimble blow to the head, Azrael breaks free. She escapes, though the camp is already bustling with activity. With no time to think, Azrael runs between the tents as Josephine rings the bell, alerting everyone. The sound of pots and cans resonating adds to the din, marking the presence of an intruder. A guard spots Azrael running towards the fence and alerts the others. Despite injuring herself on the barbed wire traps, she manages to cross just in time. A pursuer tries to follow her and gets caught. From the other side, Josephine orders them to shoot, but luckily, the shots narrowly miss. Azrael continues her escape through the forest, risking her life until exhaustion overcomes her. Panting, she leans on a rock, unaware that her hands are injured and bleeding. Suddenly, a creature starts licking the rock, startling Azrael. She tries to move away silently, but a second monster, much faster, approaches at full speed. The beast is about to reach her when Azrael stumbles and falls into a hole, dodging the attack. She takes a few more steps and is blinded by an intense light that knocks her down. When she regains her sight, she realizes that she has emerged on a road, narrowly escaping being run over. When the driver gets out of the vehicle, Azrael doesn't recognize him, but he shows no signs of hostility, only genuine concern for her state. Although Azrael doesn't understand his words, the warmth in his voice convinces her that he may be an ally. Determined to leave the cult behind, she quickly gets into the car, urging him to speed up. The driver, trying to understand what is happening, asks her several questions. However, the language barrier prevents effective communication. Deciding not to contradict the young woman's wishes, he agrees to take her. Noticing the wound on her hand, he offers her a bandage and tries to communicate through gestures. He encourages her to speak, but Azrael, determined to remain silent, only shakes her head. Seeing a cross tattooed under her neck, the driver suspects that Azrael's story might be more complicated than he initially thought. Her eyes light up with wonder when he turns on the radio, and music fills the air. It is as if it were the first time Azrael has heard melodies, and she soon immerses herself in the rhythm, finding pleasure in that unexpected moment. The driver, seeing her enjoyment, smiles, satisfied to have found a way to connect with her. However, the calm is abruptly broken when something hits the windshield and strikes the driver's head. One of Josephine's followers has emerged on the road, firing at the vehicle. With quick reflexes, the driver accelerates and runs over the attacker just before the car crashes. Azrael, though injured, survives the crash and manages to get out of the vehicle with difficulty, limping and on the verge of fainting. Realizing that the shooter has also survived, a wave of anger floods her, and with renewed energy, she lunges towards him, ready to confront him. In a frantic attempt to overpower him, she grabs the weapon and they engage in a fierce struggle on the ground, ending up face to face once more. Trying to fire it, she realizes the weapon is malfunctioning, and without thinking, uses it as a club. Azrael bravely withstands each blow until she manages to grab a rock and, with a desperate effort, strikes her opponent's head twice. Although she fails to completely knock him out, this allows her enough time to unlock the weapon, while he tries to render her unconscious with a chokehold. Struggling, she manages to aim and fire, finally downing her adversary. She quickly flees the scene of the fight, taking the weapon with her. Moving forward, she discovers a man resting under a tree, faintly illuminated by the flickering light of a nearby campfire. Despite her caution, she approaches and recognizes Keenan, who looks unwell and in clear need of assistance. Her desire to help him makes her neglect safety, and she falls into a trap that leaves her suspended in the air, hanging upside down by a rope. Her partner tries to signal a warning, indicating that someone is approaching. The first to appear is a camp guard, who immediately picks up the fallen weapon and attacks Keenan, knocking him unconscious with a blow. Then, a cold wind whispers through the trees, making the guard nervous, who looks around restlessly. Meanwhile, Azrael struggles in vain to grab the rope, but her hands, torn by the effort, only manage to drop blood on the ground, a latent danger in that place not only for her. Suddenly, the guard is attacked by creatures that emerge with speed and ferocity, taking him completely by surprise. He is violently dragged against the bark of the tree and then, mercilessly, torn to pieces. Suspended on the rope, Azrael watches the horrific scene from a relative's safety in the heights, too shocked to process any notion of justice. Below, Keenan lies motionless, exposed and tied to the tree. Once they finish with the guard, the beasts head towards him. The lovers exchange a heartbreaking look before the creature's jaws lunge at Keenan. While one of them distracts Keenan, the other begins to climb the tree towards Azrael. She and the beast come face to face on the branch, saliva dripping from the monster's open mouth. With skill, Azrael uses the rope to lasso the monster and with a swift movement throws it from the branch. Both descend, but while Azrael hits the ground, the monster is left hanging, a macabre ornament in the air. Exhausted and sore near the campfire, Azrael struggles to breathe. However, time to rest is a luxury she cannot afford. Gathering her strength, she gets up and retrieves the weapon. Instead of fleeing, she decides to return to the camp. Hidden behind a tree, she begins to whistle, imitating the cult's codes. With the absence of the watchman and the shooter, those in the camp do not suspect the tragedy that has occurred and fall for the deception. Soon, there are signs of movement near the fence. A man named Leon emerges at the front with a lantern, followed by Josephine, who responds to the whistle. He continues with the signal, believing he is communicating with a comrade. The group goes into the forest, leaving the fence exposed and unguarded. Sliding through the same gap as before, Azrael finds the camp in apparent desolation. The prevailing silence, however, suggests there might be people hidden inside the tents. She moves extremely carefully along the path to the church and climbs the steps without making a sound. Upon entering, she discovers the place is nearly empty, except for the figure of Miriam. She approaches the altar, finger ready on the trigger, but stops upon seeing Miriam's advanced state of pregnancy. The calm with which Miriam strokes her belly injects doubts into Azrael. In a sudden and agile move, Miriam disarms Azrael and hits her on the forehead with a frying pan, knocking her unconscious instantly. Shortly after, Azrael regains consciousness and finds herself being carried by Leon and Josephina towards an ancient tomb, under the eager gazes of a group waiting anxiously for the sacrifice. To avoid detection by hostile entities, Leon smeared more mud on Azrael's face. Inside the tomb lay a coffin made of raw wood. Without ceremony, Azrael was pushed inside. The sound of dirt hitting the coffin lid filled the air, mixing with the growing fear in her heart. Azrael pounded on the boards trying to escape, but the dirt continued to fall and the light faded. Suddenly, the sound of a lever echoed. One end of the coffin had been opened, revealing a dark and enigmatic tunnel. With creatures blocking any return, Azrael, driven by her survival instinct, entered the tunnel, groping her way through the dim light, desperately searching for a way out. However, as Azrael advances a bit through the tunnel, a humanoid silhouette appears against a beam of light, forcing her to retreat. In her hurried return to the coffin, she confronts the terrifying figure advancing towards her with growls. Azrael responds with a defensive growl, but the creature acts unexpectedly. It places a finger on her palm, sending her a sequence of shocking visions. The images invade her mind, showing her an alternate version of recent events. Miriam is violently attacked, and the church is consumed by fire. After imparting these revelations, the creature silently walks away. Meanwhile, on the surface, Leon shares moments with his girlfriend and Josefina visits her mother. As dusk falls, each returns to their respective tents, calm after the supposed success of the sacrifice. Unnoticed by all, Azrael manages to push the edge of the coffin and emerges from her underground prison. In the church, Miriam, alone in the sacristy, applies compresses to her wounds. She hears the creak of the main door and footsteps approaching. To her relief, it is Josefina, concerned about her condition. Suddenly, an anomalous glow lights up the night and both hear the commotion outside. As they step out, Josefina is horrified to see her mother's tent consumed by flames, along with other nearby structures. She rushes to fight the fire, hoping to arrive in time. Neighbors join in with buckets of water while Leon rings the alarm bell. As the fire spreads, Josefina deduces it's not an accident and, upon seeing someone fall, concludes that someone has intentionally caused the chaos before beginning to shoot. Leon's girlfriend, from her position, is the only one who glimpses the elusive figure of the assailant. However, her efforts to seek revenge fail, and the young woman ends up as another victim of the cult. Leon is forced into a hasty farewell as the flames consume the camp. Josefina is hit by a bullet and falls lifeless. There are few left to defend the group. Leon is among the last to resist. When he confronts Azrael, both fail in their attempts to shoot each other. A puzzling whistle distracts Leon, unable to determine its origin. In a burst of anger, he fires randomly until a body collapses. His expression of triumph fades upon discovering that he has shot down one of his own. Azrael, taking advantage of the chaos, stealthily approaches and decapitates him, sealing his fate with a relentless action. With an unsettling calm, Azrael walks through the remains of the camp, completely ignoring Josefina. There is an outstanding score to settle. With determined steps, she heads toward the church and enters. The interior is engulfed in an eerie silence until Miriam, wielding a butcher's knife, emerges from her hiding spot and disarms Azrael. A chase ensues among the rows of pews. In a swift move, Azrael trips Miriam, but the fight does not cease. Azrael dodges the blows while cornering Miriam and, in a revealing act, bites her neck, demonstrating her connection with the creatures of the forest. The impact of the bite causes Miriam's personal belongings to scatter across the floor, and a stray shot brings down a huge crucifix from the ceiling. Meanwhile, Josephina, recovering from her wound, limps toward the church. Azrael, seeking cover, takes refuge behind a pew to dodge more shots. Upon encountering Miriam in the midst of labor and seeing the mark of the bite, Josephina is petrified with terror. Seizing the moment, Azrael attacks her, and a brutal fight ensues between them, using the debris of the church as improvised weapons. Amidst screams of pain, Azrael delivers a fatal blow to Miriam with the butcher's knife. With her last strength, Miriam experiences a brief moment of joy upon hearing her baby's cry, but Josephina does not survive long enough to hear how those cries transform into monstrous howls. Terrified and devastated by the revelation of her child's true nature, Miriam retreats to the sacristy and, in a final act of desperation, takes her own life with the knife Azrael had dropped. As a spectral wind envelops the area, dozens of creatures head towards the church in a somber procession. Azrael advances to the sacristy while the child alternates between crying and demonic wails. The creatures fill the camp and some infiltrate the church. The climax is reached when Azrael emerges from the sacristy holding something in her arms, covered by a blanket. Suddenly, a small hand emerges from the wrapping and the creatures let out a collective cry of joy. Only then is the true nature of the child revealed. Despite its humanoid form, it has a beastly head and horns. Despite its fearsome appearance, Azrael cradles it tenderly, as if her own, showing an unbreakable bond between them.